Cageside with John Morgan.
And welcome everybody, another episode of Cageside with John Morgan. I'm your host, Eric McMahon. Damn! Off the heels, UFC 292 from a sold out TD Garden in Boston, Mass. The fan favorite, O'Malley, the Sugar Show. Sean O'Malley defeats Aljamain Sterling to become the bantamweight champion of the world. I would go through the list of everything we're going to talk about, but I have a feeling it's going to be dominated by that. So without further ado, let me bring in my co-host. His name is on the marquee. Follow him on Twitter, John Morgan _MMA. He is that pretty face right there. John Morgan, what's up, pal?
Hey, man, I said coming into this fight, I feel like this is the fight that we're going to be talking about afterwards as well, right? It had that kind of buzz going in, and, man, it's got that kind of buzz for me going out of it. Sean O'Malley got it done, and I'm telling you, all I could do was just sit there and just say, wow, wow, wow. I mean, this guy has predicted every step of the way. He's carried it every step of the way. He's heard the criticism every step of the way. He hasn't shied away from the spotlight on any step of the journey, and now he has the belt wrapped around his waist. Unbelievable night for Sean O'Malley, man. What a way to wrap up the card in Boston.
You know what? And the card needed that finish. It desperately needed the finish. Second round TKO. Sean O'Malley improves to 17-1, defeating Aljamain Sterling 23-4 to catch him the bantamweight title in absolutely thrilling fashion. I want to go back to the kind of the buildup of this fight. O'Malley has always been known of a guy calling his shot with this bravado and this brashness that in reality has made him the star that he is. But we saw a very different O'Malley leading up to this fight. I went back and watched a UFC interview that he did with through their media channels, and he straight up said, "This is by far my strongest test. I have never had a nerves surrounding a fight like I have these nerves here. And my only goal, if it goes to the ground, is to survive." He was very open about this. He wasn't saying, "I'm going to surprise everybody with my jiu-jitsu and I'm going to do this." He goes, "If and when it ever gets to the fight, my only job is to survive and see the next round," which tells me that this guy turned off the Sugar Show in preparation and turned up listen, everything I've done up to this point was to garner a reputation and to garner a following. But now is when literally I have to dial in like I have never dialed in my entire life.
Well, I think it's such a great point, and he kind of echoed it last night afterwards as he was talking about it, and he said, and I think it's a great lesson for all fighters out there, and honestly, people in all walks of life. You know, he said last night, "Hey, man, you see the hair, you see the flashy Lamborghini, you see the Sugar Show, but you don't understand. This is 12 years of me grinding every day, 3 a days, putting in the hard work," and I think that's smart because, listen, self-confidence is important. What do we talk about sometimes? How difficult and challenging this is, right? I always get mad at people when they say, "Oh, I don't like that fighter because he's cocky." I always say, listen, if you're going to put yourself in a steel cage with another trained killer on the other side looking to do damage to you, your self-confidence better be at an almost unreal level. So you have to have that. But on the flip side, you have to be showing honest assessment behind the scenes, and you have to be actually evaluating truthfully what the strengths of your opponents are, what your own weaknesses are, where your opportunities are, where you need to improve. And Sean O'Malley seemed to be doing all of that. And even last night, I loved it in his post-fight. He was still the Sugar Show for sure. He's still that guy. He had some quips here and there. But he even said, for the people that doubted him, he said, listen, if I wasn't Sean O'Malley, I probably would have doubted Sean O'Malley. Like, look at what Aljamain Sterling has done. He's the greatest bantamweight champ in history. Look at who he's beaten. I know I don't have the resume that he does. I understand why people were doubting me, but look, I proved everybody wrong, and I'm the champ now. And I love that because he's bringing that bravado. He's bringing that flash. He's bringing that style that we want to see. But behind the scenes is all the substance that's necessary to be successful.
We talked last week how styles make fights. And like, truth be told, I did a lot of research about this fight. I was so fired up for this fight. And I'm not going to say that, we may have had the best stylistic breakdown in the game, but I am saying we may have had the best stylistic breakdown in the game. Because everyone, odds makers, everybody across the board. And what did we say here last week? We essentially said these first 5 minutes are going to tell a huge story in this fight. And O'Malley is that unorthodox precision sniper, but unorthodox in the way if he's moving so much. There's no predictability when he's jumping in, when he's jumping out, which way he's going to circle out. Fighters get patterns. O'Malley doesn't have a pattern, which was going to make it so much harder for Aljo to take him down. And we saw that in that first round. Now, Aljo probably stole that first round by the late clinch and a few pitter-patter strikes, probably stole it. But when I was watching it, I'm here in Tulsa right now. I was at my wife's grandmother's 93rd birthday party, right? And I had her cousins. I said, listen, we're ordering the fight. Don't worry, I get to expense them. It'll be on me, right? And so we were and they're saying, what's going on? What's going on? And in that round, I said, this is going to be a lot tougher of a fight. Aljamain Sterling is having a hard time cutting off O'Malley. Did you see that as well?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this opening round I thought was tense. It was exactly as we said it was going to be, right? And Aljamain Sterling was struggling to get tight, was struggling to get in for the takedowns. I thought he won the round. He won the round on all three judges' scorecards. He won the round on my personal scorecard as well. But even Aljo in between rounds came back and he was asking his corner. He's like, close round, guys. What do you think? Do you think I won that? I'm not sure. So that shows to me in his head, he wasn't even sure whether he won the round or not. And I think, to be honest, that probably led into what happened in round two, where things changed. And I think he felt a little bit of pressure to be like, that didn't go as good as I thought it was going to go. I got a little bit more aggressive. And I think that aggression ended up kind of turning into his undoing.
So, the strikes was, I believe it was Aljamain 13-8 in significant strikes. And probably 10 of those strikes were in that clinch little boom, 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 like what really makes a significant strike. But there was one telling point in that first round where I said, whoa, okay, this is going to be a dogfight right now. And Aljamain decided to tried to close that distance like his patented feint. I'm going to close the distance. And O'Malley stuck out this very stiff jab. And I remember it kind of stopped Sterling right in his tracks. And it was very telling to me right in that moment, because then for the rest of the round, he wasn't really wanting to close that distance. And then finally, in that last 15, 20 seconds of the round, it was a reckless closing the distance just to win the round. And so it wasn't as calculated closing. And I really, truly believe he thought he was going to close that distance, and O'Malley was circling, and then bam, this jab came out of nowhere, and it stuck Sterling. Did you see that same exact thing I'm talking about?
100%, because I think that's what we were both looking to see the whole time. It's just that, man, Sean O'Malley has to be aware at all times. He has to be aware of what's happening. And when he has those opportunities, he's got to land. And that's that dangerous striking, right? Because he can throw it off the back foot. He can throw it off the front foot. He can throw it while he's slipping out to either side. He's got those angles, and he's so precise and he's so powerful with it. Even though he's got that long, wiry frame and doesn't look like maybe he should pack that much power, he does because of his precision, because of his speed. And I do think, that caught Aljamain Sterling's attention.
And that was the fight within the fight. We both said on this show last week, the fight is going to be determined on whether Aljamain Sterling is willing to walk through that fire to get to the takedown. Now, to Aljamain Sterling's credit, he was willing to do it. How can you not like Aljamain Sterling? First off, it's driving me crazy that people don't like this guy. And listen, if there's still hate on him because he won by an illegal knee, guess what? Peter Yan threw an illegal knee. It's the rules, right? So
I've never understood that.
You can't hate Sterling because then Aljo came back and he has shown so much dominance. It's hard to call him the best bantamweight of all time because pretty much every bantamweight champion has been the best bantamweight champion of all time. There's only 8 in the company history, and Dominic Cruz, Hanato,
Renan Barão.
Renan Barão, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, listen, it's hard to put you in the GOAT category, but he was as accomplished, if not more than any one of them, maybe aside from a Dominic Cruz. So put some respect on Aljamain Sterling's name. There's no reason for him to garner the hate from the fans that he gets. And to his credit, like we were saying, you have to walk through that fire. He was willing to walk through that fire. And so be it, maybe a little too recklessly.
I think so. I think, listen, listen, to your point, Sean O'Malley last night said he considers Aljamain Sterling the greatest bantamweight of all time. So I mean, if you don't believe us, believe it from the new champ, Sean O'Malley, who said the same. And let me just say, if you're not a fan of Aljamain Sterling's accomplishments, go watch his post-fight speech and his post-fight press conference and listen to the way he dealt with the media and what he talked about, what this loss does to him and where he is and all those things. But yes, to your point, I agree. I think he got a little bit too aggressive, and that was the concern here. And he even said afterwards, he said, listen, man, maybe if I'd have been willing to fight a little bit more boring, that, this thing could have gone a different way. And maybe we could have just kept repeating round one over and over, and I could have edged out the scorecards. But, I didn't want the doubters to say that to tell me why I didn't deserve to be champion. I wanted to put on a show for the fans that came in and paid their money, and credit to him for doing that and understanding, this is about wins and losses, but it's about entertainment as well. But I do believe that he got a little bit careless. He got a little bit reckless. I think he got a little bit frustrated that things weren't going the way he thought it was going to be, that he thought he was going to be able to track Sean O'Malley down a little bit easier. He thought he was going to be able to get to the takedown. He thought he was going to be able to get to the back. He thought he was going to get to do all the things that Aljamain Sterling is phenomenal at, and it didn't work out. He did it against Peter Yan. He did it against Henry Cejudo. Why wouldn't I be able to do it against Sean O'Malley? Well, you weren't able to, and unfortunately, I think he got a little bit reckless in that second round.
So I'm going to take this off of my own experience, right? And I don't want to say this is what happened, but this is what I saw. And I saw it because it's kind of a natural reaction for people, especially me. I did fight and I'm more of a wrestler based. And so if I'm going with a longer and a better striker than me, and I eat a shot or two on the outside, I said, okay, there's two routes to go with this. I can stay completely out of the fray and have zero ability to take the guy down, or I can almost just bite down and throw some looping overhand just to maybe garner reaction to close that distance. And to me, from what I saw, that's exactly what happened. So Aljamain Sterling, let's going into that second round. First off, 0 of 2 on takedown attempts. But this is to my point, is that when you have to just say I just got to go. I just got to go. And you go, it doesn't put you in the proper takedown position because you're kind of like clenching down, holding your breath, closing your eyes, and just closing that distance where then, it allows, O'Malley to grab that wrist control. He's almost in the best defensive posture available because your entry was so reckless because you had to decide, am I all the way out or all the way in? And you don't have much time to determine that. So it's just like 1, 2, 3, go.
Yeah. I think that's a phenomenal description, man. As always, you do a great job of explaining kind of the mindset and the tactical outcomes that are there for you. And I think you hit it spot on. And let's go back to the fact as well that when we talk about the type of wrestler or grappler that Aljamain Sterling is, he's the funk master, right? What did we say going? He's not the guy that's just going to blast double into you or he's going to scoop up the low. I mean, that's what he does, right? He kind of creates those wild little scrambles to get to the entries instead of being able, if you're Brock Lesnar and you get touched up, you can just put your head down and bull rush in and just hit the power double. And that's not what Aljamain Sterling does. And so because of that, I think that, if you have the speed, the timing, the creativity, the understanding, the way that Sean O'Malley does, you can deal with it. And I think that's what we saw here. And you still, and it's funny because you can see it, you can anticipate it, but you still got to deliver the counter shot as well, and that's what Sean O'Malley is so good at doing.
We'll get to that counter shot because segments happen that lead to the finish, right? And just prior to that, in that second round, Aljamain Sterling does have a good entry. He gets into a high single leg takedown, and O'Malley did everything right. He went wrist control, pushed it down, turned his hips, and then kind of like knee slid out of it, like a high knee slide, and got his leg out, in which, you can do that when you're 4 inches taller than the other guy. And that really just said to, in my opinion, to Aljamain Sterling, he's like, okay, plan B. Okay. And so when plan B happened, now my plan B is what we just referenced earlier. I'm going to throw a looping to try to get him to come here. And then now my entry is a lot better. And that's exactly what happened. He came overextended with the punch and break down this counter for us. Would you?
Oh my goodness, man. Just the type of distance management and awareness and understanding of what's coming at you next, right? And understanding what Aljamain Sterling is trying to do. I think Sean O'Malley just had, if I'm being honest, no respect really for the striking that was coming his way, but understanding that the striking was a means to set up the grappling. So what do I need to do? I need to pull back, I need to slide off, and I need to come back with that straight counter. And he delivered it with perfection on the button. And you could see Aljamain Sterling as momentum's going in. And add that to it as well, right? You talk about Sean O'Malley's ability to strike precision moving backwards, but when your opponent is moving forward, that's just physics, right? That just adds to the power of the blow because you're coming charging full into it. And you see Aljamain Sterling, go face first down into the canvas with you being the trained licensed referee. And we've talked about it all the time. When you fall face forward, that's more of a sign of real damage than it is of staggering backwards. And so you had a real powerful shot that, almost ended the fight instantly, but it was just the precision of the counter movement and the landing. Phenomenal.
One thing I was marking down in my notes the other night, getting ready to talk about this, and I want to get back to the finishing sequence here in a second. But again, the segments within the game that lead to it were these teeps up the middle and these push kicks into the belly, right? And so we talked about arm range, length, but where that height difference comes in, O'Malley was doing a fantastic job of keeping that distance and saying, you're going to have to make a decision, Aljamain, because you're eventually just going to have to go, because those kicks up the middle were just keeping Aljamain honest the whole time.
Yep.
And you know what? And he was landing them. Boom, right in the midsection. Boom, little up kick. And we saw about, I think maybe like 3 or 4 of those in the first round, which then I think it was making Aljamain hard time really cutting off O'Malley. So then when we come into the second round, going into that finishing sequence, Aljamain's all the way out. He's not in range. He's all the way out of range, saying, I'm going to close it as fast as I can with a blinding overhand just to get the hands up. And he was so far out of range that, as you said, boom, pow. And it was as perfect and as beautiful of a counter as you will ever see.
It really is, and it's just what we've seen out of Sean O'Malley. And the big question we had, all of us, was just like, hey, yeah, we've seen him do it against competition that's not exactly on the championship level, but we've seen him do it, right? That's what we got so excited about this fight, because when you laid out the styles, he had everything that it took to counter a guy of Aljamain Sterling's skill level. We just didn't know if he could do it at that high of a level, in that pressure of a moment, in a UFC championship fight. And I'll be honest, man, as he was walking to the cage, I wasn't sure. I looked at it. I was like, "It was Sean O'Malley a little nervous right now?"
Oh, my God, yes, he was.
Oh my, it just, I didn't know. I was like, "Is he going to clam up in this moment?" I mean, which can absolutely happen. I mean, you think about what Sean O'Malley does: put the pressure on me, put the world on me. Look at me, I'm that guy. And then all of a sudden, you get there, and it's like, "Oh man, I didn't know I was actually going to be here. Like, I can't believe this actually worked out. What's going to happen?" And I thought he might, clam up a little bit and not be able to execute. But what did he show? That all those things that we've seen, all those highlight reels that he's put together, all those moments, he was still able to do the exact same thing, clear his head and execute in the biggest fight of his life on the biggest stage that he's ever been on against an incredibly high-level opponent. And as you said, absolute perfection in that finishing sequence. So absolute perfection. How about this? That the UFC put the pay-per-view finish on social media immediately after the fight. If you're not a hard fan, if you're not just watch all time, that doesn't happen ever. That's what they do. They don't put that finish on social media right after, and they did it for this.
Because O'Malley is a superstar. I'm going to go on here pretty soon and just see how many views that has. And here's the thing, is that when you have these two forces that are colliding and styles make fights. Some people are just built to handle that style. It takes nothing to say Aljamain Sterling isn't still the best bantamweight champion of all time. He's certainly in the conversation, right? But that length in that style, everybody has a kryptonite. Everybody, right? So jiu-jitsu for me, like wide open De La Riva, spider lasso guards, just a kryptonite for me, right? And this kind of was like, if I'm going to put it in a striking scenario, O'Malley's that wide open guard that just gives a suffocating fighter fits. And it gave him fits. He didn't know when to close the distance, how to close the distance in any of these sequences. When have you ever seen Aljamain go 0-4 on takedowns?
Never, ever, ever. Unbelievable. And you know what's kind of striking me as we get through the aftermath of all this, right? Because we broke down, we understand what Sean O'Malley's game is, and when you talk about kryptonite, we think maybe a Merab Dvalishvili and Umar Nurmagomedov, that might be his kryptonite. But what I keep thinking about now is it might be harder to beat Sean O'Malley over 5 rounds than it is to beat him over 3, right? Because if you're that wrestler that needs to control him, you got to control him round after round after round. And he's that guy that packs the nuclear bomb in his hands and can end you at any moment. And now you don't get to just bank 2 rounds and survive the 3rd. Now you've got to bank 3 and survive the other 2. So he might be harder to beat over the course of 5 rounds because he just needs that one moment, man. This title reign moving forward is going to be awfully interesting.
Let's get to the stoppage. All right. And
love to hear your perspective on this.
I'll give it, but there's been a lot of chatter. Even Merab comes in, starts he gave his 2 cents on Marc Goddard, unjustly in my opinion. But I want to hear what your opinion of that stoppage was.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just say Marc Goddard, one of, if not the gold standard referees in the game right now. A man that is so educated, has been around this game so long, is top of the food chain. Now, does that mean that people that are at top of their position don't make mistakes sometimes? Of course not. So just because I'm saying he's a great referee doesn't mean that his performance isn't open for evaluation. It is. Here was my thought on it. And I'll just say it up front. I didn't love the stoppage, but I certainly didn't hate the stoppage. And let me lay that out because let's talk about the fall immediately, right? Drops down, he goes forward. We know anytime a fighter falls face forward, that's a real sign of imminent danger. But he flips to his back pretty quickly, and now what's Aljamain doing? He's working his open guard. He's tracking, right? That's another thing you're looking for as a referee, right? Are you actually tracking where the attacks are coming from? He was doing a pretty good job of it. Not a great job of it, but he was close. I think he was still a little bit uncertain of what was going on. And then at some point, the punches continue to come. He's taking continued damage, not the lights out type of damage, not head necessarily just banging off the canvas type of damage, but still taking.
Although it did a couple times.
Although it did. Yeah. I'm saying I've seen the ones that thud worse, but it definitely did hit. So he's taking some serious shots. These were not pitter-patter shots. They were big, big shots. And then Aljamain kind of turns face down. And to be honest, I felt at the moment he was turning face down, I thought it was because he realized that the open guard wasn't working, that he wasn't able to really slow things down from there. And so he was going to try to turn to post to crawl back to his feet, because I didn't necessarily see turn to the stomach and just, shell up and cover. I thought he was trying to post, but he had taken a lot of shots at that point, and it didn't look like his hands were fully underneath him. So I get it. The stakes of the fight are so high. It is a UFC title fight, but as I'm sure you'll speak to as well, I mean, while yes, referees, I think, should to some degree consider what type of fight. If it's an amateur fight with a guy that's got to go back to work on Monday morning, we need to be really quick on the trigger because this guy doesn't need to be taken. This is sport at the highest level. However, health and safety of the fighter is still number one, regardless of the stakes of the fight. And, if Marc Goddard made that call, I'll be honest with you, I think he's, again, the gold standard in the business. I don't have a problem. So to me, I wouldn't hate it if it went another shot or two, but I'm certainly not sitting here saying early stoppage, early stoppage, early stoppage. It was one of those ones that just right down the middle for me where I go, all right.
Here's My take on it. I have zero problem with the stoppage. I think Marc Goddard is, like you said, the gold standard in this game. Aljamain Sterling put Marc Goddard in a no-win situation. Okay? Because rule number 1, protect yourself at all times, intelligently defending yourself. I don't care if it's for 1 second or 10 seconds. When you turn your back to your opponent after taking 15 shots and getting dropped, what do you want Marc Goddard to do there? Now, everybody can say he was rolling away from 2 posts to get into a turtle position to explode up. Possibly. Probably. But you had just been flatlined down face first, taking huge shots. An open guard was walked around almost at will. Right before he bellied himself down and turned his back, O'Malley, what I like to do was did what I like to refer to almost as the Fedor punch, swung the legs out of the way, bam, and it hit clean as can be. Then right after that punch, Aljo decided to, and we know this, typically you never turn your back to an opponent, ever. Because especially in a grappling situation, because at that point, they can jump on your back, they can choke you, they could, now they're hip riding you and throwing punches from the side. Aljo's a wrestler, so they're a little more comfortable doing that. But typically, you come into them. You're trying to slide under into half guard. You're trying to grab a leg. You're trying to do anything. So in a typical stance from a referee, once you saw the knockdown, then you saw the 15 shots where 5 or 6 of them were eaten, clean as can be, huge hammer fists. Then the Fedor punch. Then he rolls to his stomach and shows his back. Now you're not tracking. And Marc Goddard was put in a no-win situation. Can you say it was an early stoppage? Yes. You can say almost every fight was an early stoppage. Are people at that level going to protest every stoppage? Yes. But here's the telling point to me, is when he turned his back and Marc Goddard stopped it, Aljo gave the, man, what are you doing, man? This champion. I understand. Because Aljo knew, in my opinion, Aljo knew the mistake he made. And the mistake he made was turning his back. As a referee, our job is to protect the fighter from the fighter, protect them from themselves. I hate that there's controversy, if there really is controversy about this stoppage. I hate that it happened. And but it was for the safety of Aljamain Sterling. Does anybody want to see him take 10 more shots? Absolutely not. Was he hurt badly? Was he compromised? Yes. He even stayed in that kneeling position for another minute afterwards. He was definitely hurt in that position. His pride and his competitive spirit said, I could have continued. Marc Goddard, in my opinion, made the right call for the simple fact is Aljamain Sterling turned his back to his opponent after taking 15 unanswered blows.
Yeah, you do a great job of explaining it, obviously coming through your trained eye, because you're right. I mean, had he maybe gone to that turtle position and trying to post immediately after getting knocked down, maybe you go, okay, well, let's see if he can crawl back to his feet or not, right? He goes down face first, rather than turn to his back, he's just going to try to stand up from there. Let's see what happens. But it was after all that damage that he had already taken. And listen, you're 100% right as well in that, what are we saying if we say maybe it was a little too early that, maybe one, I mean, even me, I would say, he takes 1 or 2 more shots. I think there's no controversy whatsoever. But what if those 1 or 2 more shots are the ones that end up delivering some permanent damage? I know that's not a fun thing to talk about, but it's absolutely the truth of what's going on inside the cage. And I'll tell you what, there was an interesting part in the post-fight press conference as well, where Aljamain Sterling, because I didn't catch this on the audio or the camera, where Aljamain Sterling said the doctor asked him which state he was fighting in, and he wasn't sure. And he said he said afterwards, and it was a little bit, it was interesting. Like he was kind of joking with it a little bit, Joe. But he was like, I'll be honest with you. He's like, I just said in the moment I forgot. Massachusetts isn't a place that we go compete a lot. He was like, I know we're not in Las Vegas, but I can't remember. And so he was explaining, hey, this was just a weird moment. I just actually forgot. And that might be true. But again, it just kind of goes to show, hey, man, what are the doctors looking for as to whether it was just or not? Their question is answered. So that's why I say, to me, if you're complaining of early stoppage, if you're calling this controversial, I can't really side with you there. Like, I have no complaints about it. I guess my regret is kind of what you just said. Like, I only wish there was no controversy at all. And that's why I say I didn't love the stoppage, because I was like, oh, maybe 1 or 2 shots, let him see what happens when he posts. But what if he's trying to get post and gets hit with another one of those big shots and it puts him out cold, and that's the one that does permanent damage? He had taken some damage. There's no question about it.
Let me change the position, and let's see if we think this is a justified stoppage or not. A fighter A is standing up. He takes 15 unanswered blows, albeit not all of them clean, but still he's here. A lot of them come through. Then he takes one more big shot and turns his back to his opponent. Justified stoppage?
100%. Yeah, you're right. Because you can't justify, well, I turned my back so that I could post to get off the fence and push away from the fence. Whereas on the ground, you could say, well, it looked like he was going face down to post to get up. But you're right. I think that's a great comparison. And yeah, no controversy.
Yeah, so that's why I don't really see a controversy. If there was a mistake made, it was in the scrambling of Aljamain Sterling. Although I know why he did it. If he wasn't as hurt as we thought he was, or Marc Goddard thought he was, I understand why he does it. Because me as a wrestler who does jiu-jitsu, a lot of times I say, I am confident in my scrambling ability that I'm going to give up my back really quick to get to my back to then maybe dive right back under and get a half guard position. So I understand why he did it. It's just that would put Marc Goddard in a no man's land position, and you have to go to your training. He turns his back after taking strikes. It leaves me one option, and that option is to stop the fight.
I love it. I love it. A great explanation, and one that not many people can provide with the level of expertise that you can. I think that's what's so fun about getting to talk to you about these situations, because you're spot on in your assessment and your description of everything.
Well, bam. So with your point of them putting up the finishing sequence on YouTube, we talked last week. What will happen if the Sugar Show reigns supreme at 292? And he did. And Dana White says he's not going to be a superstar. He's already a superstar. And do we think he can meet Conor McGregor status?
Ooh, so tough, right? I mean, because Conor, the level of star power that Conor had and has to this day is just, it's the biggest in the history of the company. And I mean, the Floyd Mayweather crossover.
Star power, right?
It is. It's a new generation star power. This is the next generation, and they consume things differently. They like things differently. I mean, it's a different model. I mean, I don't even know. I mean, how many Twitch streamers does this guy have? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Twitch? Like, I know exactly. I'm like, I don't even know. How do I check that? But I know he's big at it. I mean, I know this power. Is he going to be Conor McGregor? When people would say like, oh, can he be as big as Muhammad Ali or something? You're like, whoa, wait. You're talking about,
calm down, young fella.
Yeah, exactly. Like, come on, man. You're talking about icons.
He didn't rewrite history here.
100%. But is this guy going to, move the needle in unmistakable ways? Absolutely. You heard Dana White talking last night. This is already the most successful bantamweight title fight in UFC history in terms of pay-per-view buys. And look, as much as you and I both love Aljamain Sterling as a fighter and a person, sorry, it's not him that got that done. It's Sean O'Malley. He's the one. He's the one that speaks to the casual fan, man, and that's what it takes. We're hardcores, man. We love it. We watch the first fight of the night. We watch all these things in between, but it's those casual fans. Though that's when the baseline of where a fighter's popularity really jumps up, is when people from all different walks of life, from all different different sectors of society can look in that guy. And Sean O'Malley just has it, right? I mean, dude, let's be honest. He's got that it factor. He's got that X, that thing that you can't really describe. It's just when you look at him, you're like, damn, that dude's a star. You know what I mean? And he welcomes it. He's not afraid. He's just cool. Bro, you're coming in with your hair and multicolored braids. You got the tats lined up. You go deliver big finishes like that. You get on the mic and say big things. You grab a J afterwards and fire it up. And the guy, he's just cool, whether you like it or not. And his style is fan friendly. And man, superstar. The Conor McGregor comparison is tough, man, because that's the highest level of superstardom. But take it one notch below that, and yeah, he's going to be as big as anybody in the sport, no question about it.
I was already a huge fan of O'Malley. I love watching him. I love his persona. I just love the gimmick. And it's poetry in motion when he fights, right? And as a purist, I love seeing that. Here's what I especially now have so much more respect for O'Malley. He didn't go into gimmick right afterwards. He soaked in that moment. And for me, as a true fan and having such a love for this game, I appreciated that so much that he just said, I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to soak it in. And you know what? And I'm going to let the crowd do what the crowd does. I'm going to go embrace the people that I need to embrace right away. My corner. He didn't jump up and go nuts and I'm the man, I'm this, I'm that, or whatever. He jumped up and he hugged his cornerman first. Like, it's just refreshing to see. How can you not love that?
Amazing. The guy has it. How did we start the show? By talking about the fact that there is all the bravado, that there is all the star, that there is all of that. But behind the scenes, there's real work and there's real commitment and there's real passion in comparison to what he's doing. And it's amazing. And you're right. I mean, again, he broke out of that, just the Suga show for a while last night. He talked about the respect that he did have for Aljamain Sterling. He talked about the nerves that he did have, coming into this because he recognized what a challenge it was. He talked about all those things, and that's what we appreciate, right? Is when people will give us a little shine. But then he also gave us a little bit of the Suga show as well. He talked. I thought the greatest line post-fight, in his post-fight address in the media was when people asked him about Chito Vera and the first fight. And for those that don't know, he does have a loss on the record to Chito Vera, and he said, and he's always joked about it, right? He's always been like, I'm undefeated, the undefeated Sean O'Malley, and that just irked people, including Chito Vera. Somebody asked about the post-fight press conference, and he's like, the Suga State Athletic Commission has dismissed that fight. It never happened. They've reviewed it. They've expunged it. The Suga State Athletic Commission says that fight never happened. I was just a subtle little like, oh, come on, that's funny. That's a little bit of Chael Sonnen in there as well. Like, not everything I say has to be factual. Some of it can just be fun and entertaining. So this guy is the package, and he can fight in a way that anybody can appreciate. Again, you and I, we love grappling, right? We're passionate about it. And I think that's one of the reasons we love Aljamain Sterling, because his grappling is so high level. But as in the evolution of a fan, it takes a while. If you're first exposed to mixed martial arts, you see the grappling game and you get a little bit confused. You don't really understand who's winning or what's trying to be done or how they're approaching it. And as you watch it more and more, you start to develop an understanding for it, right? But if you've never seen a mixed martial arts contest before, and you see Sean O'Malley hitting step back, slip, straight, knocking people to the floor, you don't need to understand anything about MMA to be like, hey, I know what it looks like when somebody knocks somebody else out, and that dude is cool. So, man, the guy is on the rocket ship. He was already on the rocket ship, but the rocket ship just turned course. It's going even higher.
Okay, you brought up Chito Vera. Good. He was next on my list. Gosh, we're 37 minutes into this podcast, and we are still talking about the main event. This is crazy. So, Chito Vera, the one loss on O'Malley's record, he calls them out. That can't be the fight to make, though, can it?
Oh, get out of here. That is absolutely the fight to make. And let me tell you a couple reasons. 100% that's the fight to make. And, hey, remember, when we talk about fights to make, what do I always talk about?
What the fans want.
Well, true, but what business dictates as well, right? Like, you do a phenomenal job of breaking things down from an officiating perspective, a referee perspective. I think I've been so ingrained with the UFC for a long time that I kind of understand their mindset. And how does this all work out? Now, we can talk about the various, deservedness of all the contenders. And is he necessarily the most deserved to happen? No. But what else do we have to remember? We said all year long, we thought that end-of-year card, T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, was going to be Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler. Conor McGregor still not back in the USADA testing program yet. Still thinks that he's going to fight in December. I don't see it happening. So this way I see it is the UFC is still looking for a main event in December in Las Vegas. Merab Dvalishvili still healing up a little bit. Corey Sandhagen still healing up a little bit. Aljamain Sterling wants a rematch, but he even said, I need some time off first. So now you've got three guys that may have more of a case that are really on the sidelines right now. So what do we need for the end of the year in Las Vegas at Star Power? Fight up. That to me is Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera. Book it. That's your headliner in Las Vegas in December. T-Mobile Arena. See you there, guys.
Nostradamus Morgan is at it again. Hey, listen. O'Malley goes, hey, did Chito win tonight? Yeah, he did. It was boring, right? Like, that was hysterical to me.
Somebody in the media was like, well, it was tactical. It was tight. He's like, so boring, right? Oh, so great.
But you know what? I don't think Chito Vera is boring at all. I love
Nah.
that he downloads the information. He gets stronger as the fight goes. He's brilliant. But we have to get off this main event. I could talk this for hours. Let's just really quickly go through. We only got a few minutes left in this. Zhang Weili with a dominant victor over Amanda Lemos. 296 significant strikes to 29. Most biggest difference in company history.
So this was an interesting fight, right? Because I said going in all, I think Zhang Weili was, I mean, she's incredible, right? She's one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the game. I liked her. But what I thought a lot of people were doing was writing Amanda Lemos off with not really understanding who she is. And she is dangerous. And we saw it, right? She's got sneaky little submissions that she can throw up. Darce choke looked like it's there. When she's on her feet and throwing strikes.
Darce choke from her back.
Unbelievable, right? And it looked a little bit tight to me. Zhang said it wasn't, but it looked a little bit tight to me. Amanda Lemos, when she's on the feet throwing strikes, she throws bombs, man. I mean, she throws huge. And so what I thought was this was one of those fights where Zhang Weili could potentially dominate and yet get caught somewhere along the lines by Amanda Lemos. That just didn't happen. It was a dominant performance by Zhang Weili. It was a fun night for me, even though I wasn't TD Garden last night. You know, I was back home here in Las Vegas. My dad and my stepmom are in town visiting in the same way that you're visiting family. So it was kind of cool for a couple of the featured fights last night. My son was with me. My dad was with me. We had 3 generations of Morgan sitting there watching. And my son was just watching that strike count going up and up. I mean, even he, 11 years old, he's like 292 to 10. Like, what is that? It's crazy. Unbelievable performance by Zhang Weili. And now we've got some interesting decisions to make with her right now, right? Because I think it's all going to boil down to what the UFC is trying to do business-wise there. Because if they can do an event in China with Zhang Weili and Yan Xiaonan, Chinese champion versus Chinese challenger in China, can you imagine how big that fight is going to be? So if they can pull off the China event, I think we see that next. If not, keep your eye, and we talked about it, but keep your eye on her. Tatiana Suarez is, I think, the only fighter in the division right now who watched that fight on Saturday night and said, yeah, I can beat her. So I can't wait to see that fight.
Moving on. I had a lot to talk about this next guy, but we don't have the time, so we'll just breeze over the fight. Ian Garry improves to 13-0 with brutal leg kick game over Neil Magny. Go.
Yeah. Look, I love this fight, and you're right. I mean, Sean O'Malley just took all the oxygen out of everything because you have to. It was an amazing performance. But Ian Machado Garry, pay attention to this kid. I really, a lot of people didn't like the late replacement here. I thought seeing Neil Magny step in as a late replacement would answer a lot of questions that I had about just how real Ian Machado Garry is, because nobody does to Neil Magny what Garry did to Neil Magny on Saturday night. Garry is absolutely the real deal. He's young. He's undefeated. He's confident. Did you see he did an open workout after his weigh-ins? Come on, man. How cool is that, doing that for the fans? Dana White said, listen, the play next is get him on Madison Square Garden. Obviously, that November card. Get him in Madison Square Garden, see what he does there. If he wins there, then we go to Ireland, where he's from, of course. We put him over there in Dublin, which would be amazing. This is another guy. And I love it. You listen to what Ian Garry said after people were saying, well, hey, they say you're going to fight at Madison Square Garden. Do you think that in a title shot? And Ian said, no, I got 4 more fights before I'm ready for the title because I want to fight Wonder Boy. That fight's not going to happen. Wonder Boy turned it down, but he said, I want to fight Wonder Boy. I want to prove that I'm the best striker. Then I want to go get better at grappling. He understands I've got to be the absolute best in the world, and he believes he's going to be there. But he's another one. He's a guy that if you were doubting him, if you were saying this is a hype job, this is just the next Irish kid, they're just trying to find the next Conor McGregor. This dude is the real deal, and I'm excited to see where his career progresses.
All right, and one that I think broke the collective hearts of everybody who watched it, Brad Tavares, even though everybody loves Brad Tavares, and how can you not? I mean, the guy's been in the game so long, and he's just a sentimental favorite of everybody. But unfortunately, he had to fight Chris Weidman, returning off of a shattered leg against Uriah Hall, 2 and some years and change now at this point. Yep. And Brad Tavares spoils the return of Chris Weidman by unanimous decision in a, honestly, watching it, a cautiously optimistic but heartbreaking fight to watch, in my opinion.
I hated this fight from the moment it was announced. I really did, just because I have a lot of love for Brad Tavares. You know, met him when he was on The Ultimate Fighter. He's a longtime Vegas resident like myself. So, I mean, I've just covered his career up close for a long time. He lives right by me. I run into him at the park with our families and stuff. I mean, I have a lot of love for that guy. But Chris Weidman, how do you not love that guy? I mean, what he accomplished was amazing. What he went through was incredible. We knew what this moment meant to him. But Brad Tavares is just, wasn't there. I mean, Brad Tavares fighting with a heavy heart as well, right? Obviously still roots in Hawaii, and everything that they're going through right now is unbelievable. So, Brad wasn't there to be anybody's fairy tale, anybody's Cinderella story, and he got the job done. The mutual respect between the two is what this sport is all about. Like, let's just go beat the crap out of each other, but then, we're boys after, and let's go grab a beer. I mean, that is truthfully one of my favorite things about this sport. It was heartbreaking to see. And it sounds like Chris, not only did the legs get chopped up, but it sounds like there's some real ligament damage and more surgeries. And, whether or not Chris is going to want to go through this whole process again, I don't know. So it was
Dana White reporting that he either toward his MCL, LCL, or MCL. Definitely one, if not all of them, in that fight. And that minimum, if he ever comes back, it's a year away, and he's going to urge Weidman to retire. And it's just what really broke my heart being a father. Is watching him embrace his family in a wheelchair after the fight. Were you able to see any of those clips? He has a huge bag of ice on his calf after taking just vicious attacks, and you see him kissing his wife, his daughter, and I'm just sitting there, and his daughter had tears in her eyes, and like, oh, yeah.
It's the worst. As parents as we both are, we know what that means, and I think that those are the real conversations, right? I think those are the ones where the family starts saying, "Hey, man, we don't want to see you go through this anymore. Like, you got nothing to prove. You're the man. You reached the highest level of the sport. Financially, I know he's done very well in his career.
He beat Anderson Silva. He's got nothing to prove.
He's a legend. He's a true. I mean, that is one of the most iconic moments in the sport. I mean, it really. That is one. I mean, I was talking to some people before this fight, just kind of reliving Chris Weidman's career. That is one that I remember, like, walking out of the arena, like shaking, you know what I mean? Because I was just so jarred by what I had seen. It was just like, oh my God, I mean, Anderson Silva was the man, and he knocked him out in his prime. Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable. Legend
of the game. Watching that Weidman on the build up to that Anderson Silva fight, he was running through everyone, and he was even taking like 2 week short notice fights. I mean, that's a guy who was driven. He got there, he became a superstar. And man, just I hated seeing that because I love Brad Tavares, and like I didn't really have a rooting interest, but I wanted to see Chris Weidman just look so good. And the one thing, I don't know if you were watching it with me, I was scared when that fight was starting. I was like, are you going to throw the kick? Are you going to throw the kick? Because in interviews leading up, he was saying right off the bat, I'm going to come out, I'm going to throw the hardest leg kick I've ever thrown. He didn't. I know. You could tell he was second guessing every single thing he did, which then just put him in compromising positions. And listen, I don't care how mentally tough you are. It does not matter. If you go through multiple surgeries, setback after setback on that leg, what that did to him probably personally in his family life, everything, that's almost you can't overcome it. Look, Conor McGregor still hasn't overcome it yet either.
100%. I mean, listen, I don't know what that feeling feels like, right? But I've spent the last 20 years of my life asking these men and women exactly what those moments will feel like. And I'm telling you, everyone that goes through a major reconstructive surgery like that comes into the fight saying that, nope, I've tested it in training. I'm good to go. I have 100% confidence in it. And every one of them afterwards goes, I'm not going to lie. I got in there and I was a little bit hesitant. I was a little bit worried. I was a little bit scared. And as crazy as it sounded for Chris Weidman to say, I'm going to throw the hardest leg kick I ever have, I kind of think if he had done that, it might have been, given him that little rally that he needed to get things going. And he just didn't. And again, Brad Tavares was merciless as you have to be and chopped the legs apart and did what he should. And again, by the way, should point out, by the way, that's always been Brad Tavares' game. So it's not as if he just like, I'm targeting this leg because I know it's weak, which not that there would be anything wrong with that. If you're aware of it.
Targeting the other leg, the lead leg. It's not like he's going after the bad leg.
Exactly. He's always chopped the legs like that. So, I mean, just, yeah, again, I'm telling you, when they announced that fight, I was just like, like, don't make me watch that. And that's kind of how I felt afterwards. I was just like,
Well, to put a bow and a recap on this episode, the Sugar Show, new bantamweight champion of the world from a sold-out UFC 292 TD Garden Arena in Boston, Massachusetts. The hype is real, ladies and gentlemen. The show has started. What's up?
I want to say too, if you didn't go see Katona versus Cody Gibson, if you didn't watch The Ultimate Fighter all year long, I totally understand. But if you're looking for something to watch, you got some time, you're like, let me find something, go watch Katona versus Cody Gibson. That was a classic. It got Fight of the Night honors, but in terms of the Ultimate Fighter finales, that's one of the best you'll ever see. Both guys, it was supposed to be for a UFC contract. Dana White confirms both guys are going to get a UFC contract, deservedly so. Badasses. I just want to give a shout out to those two dudes.
Shout out Ultimate Fighter. I loved the season. Chandler came off very well in it, and I think he has gotten a lot of fans. If you weren't a fan of Michael Chandler before, good grief, you should be. But he's definitely and Dana White has said that's the fight. I don't care. That's the fight. Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler, no ifs, ands, or buts. But man, I'm anxious to see the rocket ship that is O'Malley, where he goes from here, what he does, and I just really got nothing else to say about it. He is a superstar. He came out to, you are who you say you are, a superstar, calling his shot.
That was pretty cool, right? I mean, just laying out there what was on the line through his walkout music. If you are what you say you are, man, and he is what he says he is. He is that guy, man. Unbelievable.
And who's to say that you can't be romantic about mixed martial arts? Give me a break. Loved everything about it. That wraps up another episode of Cageside with John Morgan. I'm your host, Eric McMahon. That is John Morgan. We will see you next week. Enjoy the fights.